Hello Louis, this is the test of your harness, which is a 96 to 97 LS400 1UZ non-VVTi using standard management but with a completely brand new harness. So as you can see, we've got it draped over our 3UZ for the testing, so we're going to test injectors, etc. So using this engine just to make sure everything works. So what we're going to be testing today is we're going to make sure that all the wires like your charge light, oil pressure, gauge temp, etc. are correct. And so we'll use our multimeter and we'll test that the wires are the correct sensors on the engine. We're then going to make sure that the fuel pump works, so we'll make sure the 12 volts is outputted by the multimeter when it should be. We'll make sure the starter circuit works, so we've got your sub harness actually wired in here to the starter motor, so it'll crank over when we give the correct signals there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to force feed a crank signal to it, and that's going to then show us that the tacho's working. We're going to go one by one and test all the injectors. We're going to test the coils. So we've got coils actually hooked up here with spark plugs attached, so we can actually see that it's sparking. Okay. Then we're going to test the IACV, or idle air control valve. So we've got an example of an idle control valve here, and we'll obviously be looking for this piston moving up and down to show that it's actually working correctly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through how to read the trouble codes on your harness. So to start off with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly go through all the wires that you have here. So this is basically your plug that essentially you're going to put into your vehicle. So I've replaced these two white wires with these two. So it's red and blue. They just need a permanent 12 volt supply, not an ignition, a permanent 12 volt supply. Then going down the rest of it, we've got your gray, which you'll see is obviously in there. So that's your fuel pump. You've got your yellow with a green. That's going to go to the single wire temp sensor for a gauge. You've got your yellow, which is tacho. You've got your yellow with a black tracer, and that is your oil pressure. We've got black with a yellow tracer, and that's your start signal, so that needs a 12 volt supply for that. You've got your red with your black tracer, and that's your ignition 12 volt supply to turn the system on. You've got your pink with a blue, so that's your alternator light, so that's going to give out a ground for your dash, either a LED or a bulb, etc. And you've got your yellow with your red, and that's your check engine light. So you'll see the tacho and the check engine light are connected up to our dash here, so we'll actually be able to see it all working there. Inside your fuse box there's a little red LED. All right, now that's your check engine light as well. So it's something we build into the fuse box, and it forms part of how to read the trouble codes, which we'll go through at the end of the testing. Okay, and last but not least, you've got your white with your blue. Now that is a clutch switch, so essentially that provides the ground to the starter relay. So you either run it to ground via a clutch switch, so the vehicle won't start unless the clutch is pressed in, or you can basically just connect it to ground if you don't have a clutch switch. Simple as that. So that basically covers pretty much everything you've got here. It will be in the welcome pack for you as a sort of written reference, so you can refer back to it whenever you want. And obviously in the welcome pack we'll be detailing what all these relays do, what all these fuses do, and what sort of size they should be. All right. The box does come with a fuse puller, and that'll be in the side there. I've got it out now because I'm going to show you with the trouble codes exactly what to do. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go through, and we're just literally going to multimeter off your different indicator things. So like coolant temp, oil pressure, alternator, etc. Okay. Check engine light we'll just check on the dash, so that'll be our indication for that. So first of all, we're going to start with your charge light. So obviously that's for your alternator. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to quickly come over here. So there's your alternator plug, 3-pin plug. So just out of interest, 3-pin plug, pin 1 is your alternator light, pin 2 is alternator ignition, and pin 3 is alternator sense. So pin 3 has permanent 12 volts, middle one has ignition 12 volts, and outside is your alternator light. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it in there, and as you can hear, there we've got continuity. So that means that that's absolutely fine. So next up we're going to go to oil pressure. So I'm just going to remove this from here. We're going to put it in here. Okay, so that is your black with a yellow tracer. All right, and we're going to come over to the engine, and we're going to find, there you go. So there's your oil pressure switch. Okay, and we go down there, and there you go. All right, so we're happy with that. That's going all the way to there, so that's fine. Next up, we are going to do your gauge temp. All right, so this is your temperature for a gauge. Okay, it's the single wire sensor on the 1UZ non-VVTi. So again, yellow with a green. So let's go over here. And as you can see down here, it is actually labeled as temp. So don't get it converted. There's your coolant temp sensor for your ECU. That's your 2-pin plug over there. All right, so just get a bit more length on here. And there you go. All right, so we're happy with all of that. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to do the fuel pump circuit. All right. So basically, I'm just going to explain the fuel pump circuit first to you. So this one is controlled via the ECU. It is relay activated. And basically what happens is these systems don't prime the fuel pump. What they do is they only work in 2 conditions. One is when they get a starter signal or a crank signal. And the other case is obviously when the engine is actually running. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start cranking it over. That's going to obviously confirm that the starter circuit is working as it should. So in other words, you've got this black with the yellow tracer over there. And once we do that as well, we're going to go over to here. I'm going to change it over to voltage. Okay, and I'm going to have to block out the sun here hopefully. And you should see this go up to obviously the 13 volts because I have a battery charger on here. So I'm just going to go over here, plug it into there. Okay, just going to give this an earth quickly. Okay, so we should be good. Right, so I'm going to obviously turn the ignition on for the device. So just bear with me while I do that. All right, so first of all, you can see we've got check engine light there. Just block the sun. There you go. So there's a little LED lit up. So now we know the whole system is live. We know the ECU is on. So what I'm going to do now is you can see here that we've got 0 volts. First thing I'm going to do is crank it over. While I'm cranking it over, obviously you'll hear the motor physically cranking over. So we know the starter circuit's okay. And hopefully we should be able to see 12 volts there. So I'm just going to bring this out of the direct sunlight. Okay, so let's go for it. Okay, so hopefully you saw that. Obviously the fuel pump was giving out voltage while we were busy cranking over, and you can see as soon as we stopped cranking over, it stopped giving off voltage. Okay, so again, that's one condition that it will work under. And what we're basically going to do now is we are going to force feed an RPM signal to both the crank and the cam sensor here. Once we force feed that RPM signal, you're going to start to notice the coils are going to go off. You're probably going to hear them tick, tick, tick in the background there. Then what we're going to do is we are going to go through each and every injector, and I'm hoping over the ticking of the thing you'll be able to hear it. I have tested it, so it is all working. All right, so just give me a second while we force feed that RPM signal. All right, so you can probably hear this thing buzzing away. So that's that coil sparking. All right, so there's our other coil bolted to there. And you can see that one sparking. And while I'm over here, we're going to go over. I'm going to go in as close as I can, so hopefully you can hear it, and I'm going to keep quiet. So that's number 8. Number 6. Number 4. And last but not least on this side, number 2. Try not to shock myself. Alright, I do hope you heard that. Right, let's go over to the other side now. So we've got injector 7. Okay, we've got injector 5. Okay, we've got injector 3, and they're all labeled, by the way. There goes that one. And let's do number 1. Okay, hopefully it's picking up. Right, furthermore, you can see on our dash that we're showing RPM, so that indicates to me that that's all fine. We have got the check engine light actually going off. Obviously I've plugged in pretty much every sensor apart from the TPS. Okay, so that's all fine, so I'm happy with that. Okay, oh, hang on, next up IACV. So what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to try and just balance this. Let me just see if I can, sorry, single-handedly trying to do this. Okay. So just watch that ISCV valve. See how it goes up. Obviously that's fully closed because I've got higher RPM on there. And then as soon as I turn it off, there it goes to fully open. All right, ready for the next start. Okay, so we're happy with the charge light, we're happy with the oil pressure, we're happy with the gauge temp. They're all connected correctly. The fuel pump relay is working fine. And I'll just do it again quickly to show you that the fuel pump is actually giving 12 volts when it picks up an RPM signal. Starter circuit we're happy with because obviously we heard the engine cranking over. Tacho we're happy with because we saw it on the dash. Injectors we're happy with. Coils we're happy with. Idle air control valve we're happy with. So let me just do this one more time. I've still got the multimeter connected to the fuel pump wire. All right, we can hear the buzzing again. And there you go, 13.3 volts. All right, and as I pull it off, okay, so did you notice something there? I pulled it off, you could hear the spark plug stop buzzing, but the power pump, the fuel pump stayed on for a little while. That is completely normal. When you shut off the car, the main relay stays active for a few seconds. It does a few things like, for instance, allow your idle control valve to reset to its starting position, and also keeps your fuel pump running, because remember these don't prime. So what they do is after the car shut off, they keep the fuel pump running to get the pressure up, and they've got a non-return valve which then keeps the pressure going. All right, so and in terms of fuel as well, if you weren't aware, on the back of your 96, 97, you're going to have two of these. So you've got this one over here, and sorry, the other one's going to be your regulator at the back there. Okay, so this one with the screw in, that's not a fuel pressure regulator, that's a fuel pulsation damper. So the regulator takes care of fuel pulsations on this one, and your this one takes care of the fuel pulsation on this rail over here. So don't screw this in. This isn't like a you know, like a fuel pressure regulator you could adjust, and so on and so forth. All right. So just to go over as well, this is the MAF that you should have with your vehicle. All right. So that's the correct one for this particular engine over here. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go through the trouble codes with you. Okay. So what we've basically done is we've built the system where you would normally bridge the two wires into the bridge the two wires on the port on the engine in order to get your flash codes to work. Okay, so in this case we've built them into the fuse box for you. So in here you're going to see what looks like is an open slot for a fuse. It doesn't require a fuse, and you're not going to put it in, but basically that's how you're going to check codes. So this one is your starter circuit, this little 5 amp one here, so it's safe just to take that one out. And then what I want you to notice is I'm actually just going to go over to this check engine light over here because you can see it better. I'm just going to pull that fuse out. I'm going to slot it into this one, and you'll see the light goes out immediately, and it'll start reading off the codes. So you got 1, 1, 2, 3, so it's code 12, 1, 1, 2, 3, code 13, that's for cam and crank, because I get wrong signals. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 14 again, because I'm going to get wrong crank signals. So it's got 2 and then 1, 21, that's oxygen sensor because they're not plugged in, and 2. You get the idea. I'm not going to roll through every single one, but that's basically how you read codes, and part of the welcome pack will have all those codes there. And once you pull that diagnostic fuse out, you'll see the light just comes on back as per normal. All right, so that's how you read the trouble codes. And like I said, it's a quick, easy reference. You don't need to have any special tools. You literally just pull the fuse over, you can read the codes, and it'll tell you what the problem is. All right. Reading the diagnostic codes can also be incredibly useful if you're having issues and you think it may be timing that's out. So basically, on all the UZ engines, okay, let me see. I've got sun here. And on your crank pulley, on your front cover here, you've got 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees. You're probably not going to be able to see it. Let me see if I can get in closer. Okay, anyway, it's on that cover there. So, when you bridge that diagnostic port over there, what it actually does as well is it locks the timing at 10 degrees. So again, don't leave it in there, because otherwise you're going to be locked at 10 degrees the whole time while you're driving. So make sure that that isn't bridged all the time, only when you're reading codes. But it's a very useful tool, because obviously you can put your timing light on cylinder 1, which is over here, and then effectively you can check the timing electronically. All right, so you can actually make sure that what the ECU is outputting is correct, and you can see that you're on 10 degrees. Okay, so that's just a useful tip when you're doing diagnostics for that. You can also, because of the way that the fuel pump works, in the sense that it only works when you actually have a cranking signal. What you can also basically do is you can pull out the starter fuse, take out the starter relay, bridge the starter relay to get the engine to crank, and if you don't hear the fuel pump running, then you know straight away that you've got a crank signal problem, because it's just a quick, easy way to tell if that's what it is. So if you've got issues like with no spark, etc., that can be a major cause, just a lack of crank sensor signal issues. So you'll notice if you do your timing belt, which we highly recommend if you're doing a swap, you'll see that the crank sensor down at the bottom here, obviously it's a VR sensor, so it's a magnet, so it picks up all of the filings from the timing belt as it wears out, okay? So you can find that they can get incredibly dirty. Obviously they can get damaged. They can be very old. Remember, your engine's from 96 to 97, and I'll almost guarantee you that it's never been changed. So that's usually an issue with no spark or no fuel pump, etc. But obviously when you're cranking the engine, you'll get a fuel pump. So another good indication is obviously if you sort of crank the engine and you see the fuel coming up, and then as soon as it tries to start or whatever, it gives you gas or whatever, and it turns off immediately, that also might be an indication. Okay, so here's your igniters. All right, so I bolt them to the block. They need to be earthed. So we've bought them out of the grommet here, so you can mount them onto the firewall, keep them away from the engine when you're doing your install. All right, and obviously you can see we've made the sub harness that goes underneath here is actually a separate harness. So this comes off and it goes down into your knock sensors and into your starter motor from there. All right, but in terms of the harness, everything is labeled for you. So it shouldn't be too difficult to get everything. Everything is right. You've got your T-piece here, which obviously dictates that that's going to go down there, that's going to go around the back, that's going to carry on around there. Both your lambda sensors come down the front here and go towards the back, and that applies to both sides as well. So what we're doing is normally on these ones, you'd have the oxygen sensor coming down the side. You're really close to the exhaust. So we've avoided that route and we've gone down the front right at the bottom. So you don't have to be near an exhaust or a heat source, etc. with that. Just saves you a bit of emission there. All right, but I think that's everything. Oh yeah, sorry, we have removed the immobiliser, and you can tell because obviously the engine technically is running. All the injectors and coils were firing. Most importantly, the injectors were firing. So that's a little tip for you guys if you've got an ECU with an immobiliser for a non-VVTi. So in Europe, the immobiliser version began, I think, October 1996. But there's a very easy way to tell, and that's just by the part number of the ECU. So you've got 89661 50350. So for European ECUs, if it's 89661 and it says 503, so there are superseding numbers. So you can have 50350, you can have 50351, you can have 503, etc. But what you're looking for is the 503. As soon as you see that 3 and it's a European ECU, then it's immobilized. The non-immobilized versions, which were 95 to 96, were a 50250 with subsequent numbers. So it could be a 50251, 50252, etc. Okay, so quick, easy way to tell. And the way it will behave is when you go to fire it up, it'll start and then it'll die. And then what it'll do is you can keep cranking again and again. You can keep cranking for 20, 30 minutes, all right? But the second you turn the ignition off, turn it back on again and crank it, she'll start and then die. So that is a symptom of an immobilizer, all right? So if you are concerned or you're worried or the part number's rubbed off, it's one easy way to check for you. All right, but hopefully that's been helpful, Louis. If you have any issues, again, you just give us a shout. Hopefully it's relatively straightforward for you to fit in. Everything is labeled, so there shouldn't be any problems there. So next thing to do is get this in the box and get it on its way to you. Thank you guys for watching. See you again soon. Bye-bye.